BBC News. Tim Harford looks at high-speed rail and executive pay, more or less, in half an hour. But first, it's Last Word with Matthew Bannister.
On Last Word this week, the Bulgarian-born pianist Alexis Weissenberg, whose musical skill saved his life in a Nazi concentration camp. Also, the Cockney actor Harry Fowler, the social researcher Sir Roger Jowl, and the music therapist Clive Robbins. But first, Sir Robert Horton was the controversial chairman and chief executive of BP, who went on to the equally controversial job of running Railtrack during its privatisation. His abrasive personality and self-regard was legendary. When he was ousted from BP in a boardroom coup, one employee said he treated everybody as though they were head gardener. People could not bear to have any more sandpaper rubbed over them. Bob Horton was born in London and educated at King's School in Canterbury. The future Conservative Transport Secretary, John, now Lord McGregor, met him when they were both at university in Scotland.
We were both sort of heading in the same direction, interested in business and politics. He was a good debater, he was very pugnacious as a debater, he was very focused, sometimes abrasive.
The veteran BBC business correspondent, Peter Day.
Bob Horton was sort of chosen by BP at a very early age, so he was sponsored by them at St Andrews, and later he went to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the great entrepreneurial university in Boston. I think he got a taste for American-style management in America there. He wanted to be chairman of BP. That's what he said when he was at university at St Andrews. He also said he wanted to be prime minister. It was that kind of self-confidence that set him apart from most of his peers.
Knowing that he was passionately interested in the arts, the chief executive of Arts and Business, Colin Tweedy, approached Bob Horton to join his board.
I was terrified because I'd read all the articles of him, cutting oil companies in America, and he was quite scary to look at before he smiled. He was very sort of austere. And of course, because he was chairman and CEO at the time, when you could do both jobs of one of the world's largest companies, you always thought that he would be a corporate bully. He never was with Arts and Business.
He was a very good analyst of the situation, but he was above all somebody who liked to sort things out, a man of action. If you wanted somebody who to effectively see through a job, he was very good at it. A very interesting example, BP owned Standard Oil of Ohio, and it was in a bit of a mess. It was not working properly at all. He was sent out as a Brit to sort it out.
Even the mayor of Cleveland thought that the person they called the hatchet gentleman did a pretty good job.
Bob Horton's success in Ohio persuaded the BP board that he would make a good chairman and chief executive. On his appointment, he announced big ambitions for the company.
Watch this space. We will try and demonstrate by our actions and by our results that we mean exactly what we say, and we are going to be the most successful company in the 90s.
Bob Horton set out to focus BP on its core strengths of exploration and production, whilst cutting hundreds of jobs from its bureaucratic management structure. But within 2 years, the company was in trouble as the world oil price fell. The board decided they needed a less abrasive figure in charge. According to Colin Tweedy, the BP lifer Bob Horton was devastated.
I remember when he left and when he was famously removed, he said to me something quite extraordinary. He said, they've come into my office and taken the art off with crowbars, as if this was the French Revolution, as if I was being punished in absentia for even having beautiful art on my walls. He was supposed to be at dinner with me at the Tape that evening, and he rang up and said, look, I think you've realised what's happened. He said, I can't come tonight. I said, Bob, you must come. Please, both of you must come. He said, Colin, I'll just break down in tears. He said, I just can't do it. It was brutal. To say, I'll just break down in tears, Colin, was something you didn't expect the great Bob Horton to say.
He wasn't out of public life for long. By the end of the year, he was back at British Rail, and then he became chairman of Railtrack in the run-up to privatisation and tried to deliver shareholder value for the new shareholders of Railtrack.
And do you think he succeeded?
Yes, he succeeded in the task we set him to do. I know that there were problems much later on, but I certainly think that it was a difficult job and he did it very well.
I very much hope that by providing a more efficient and reliable service in the fullness of time, we'll attract people back to the railways, which will allow us to lower the costs of actually travelling on the railways.
I think he realised it was a poison chalice, but he wanted to do things. I think that often people forget how people in business, particularly that role, when you lose your job, it's as if they lose their identity. They lose not only their PAs, their executive assistants, their shift-driven cars, but they lose the reason to get up in the morning. Running Railtrack there is a lot smaller. It was an enormous challenge, but I think he rose to it and did a very, very good job, even though Railtrack, as we know, the history of the company is very different, and a lot of it's been effectively renationalised, but he did what the government wanted him to do, and they should be grateful.
He was very, very self-confident. In that famous quotation, his most famous quotation, he said, because I'm blessed with a good brain, I tend to get the right answer rather quicker and more often than most people. That will sound frightfully arrogant.
The problem is, people with big egos, people who are big personalities, are often disliked in the modern world. If you're rich and you own your own company, that's fine. But in the corporate world, a huge personality and a big ego is considered not appropriate in them anymore. Bob, maybe one of the last of the great personalities which ran a global business.
But that self-confidence got in the way of seeing how people would respond to his imperatives. In America, they liked it. In Britain, they didn't.
Peter Day on Sir Robert Horton, who's died aged 72. Now, the pianist Alexis Weissenberg divided the critics. Some saw him as one of the greatest performers of the 20th century, whilst others criticised what they saw as a lack of sensitivity or even brutality in his playing. Alexis was born in the Bulgarian capital, Sofia. Although he came from a Jewish family, his grandmother